Do you know how much devastation a single leader can cause? Have you ever wondered how dictators throughout history have been responsible for the deaths of millions? While wars and natural disasters have taken countless lives, some of the deadliest tragedies were orchestrated by individuals who held absolute power. From mass purges and forced labor camps to man-made famines and ethnic cleansing, these rulers left behind a legacy of terror and bloodshed. But who were the worst of them all? In this video, we will uncover the 10 bloodiest dictators in history whose actions led to unimaginable suffering. Let's dive into the darkest chapters of history. Number 1. Mao Zedong, China, 1949 to 1976. Mao Zedong's rule saw some of the deadliest policies in history. The Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, aimed to transform China into an industrial powerhouse, but instead led to a catastrophic famine that killed tens of millions. Forced collectivization, unscientific farming techniques, and government denial worsened the crisis. The Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, followed, where millions were purged, imprisoned, or executed under Mao's directive to eliminate counter-revolutionaries. The Laogai labor camps, similar to Soviet gulags, held political prisoners under brutal conditions, with many perishing from overwork and starvation. Historians widely agree that Mao's policies resulted in the highest non-wartime death toll in human history, making his reign one of the most devastating of all time. Number 2. Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union, 1924 to 1953. Joseph Stalin's dictatorship was marked by ruthless purges, forced labor camps, and engineered famines. The Great Purge, 1936 to 1938, targeted political opponents, intellectuals, and even military leaders, leading to mass executions and forced disappearances. Millions of people were sent to gulags, harsh labor camps where many perished due to starvation, disease, and exhaustion. Stalin's policies also caused the Holodomor, 1932 to 1933, a man-made famine in Ukraine that killed millions. His brutal suppression of dissent and forced collectivization of agriculture resulted in widespread suffering. Soviet archives confirm these horrors, making Stalin one of the deadliest dictators in history. Despite this, he remained a key figure in World War II, further complicating his historical legacy. Number 3. Adolf Hitler, Germany, 1933 to 1945. Adolf Hitler's reign is synonymous with genocide and war. His ideology led to the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews and 5 million others, including Romani people, disabled individuals, and political opponents, were systematically murdered. Hitler's expansionist policies triggered World War II, causing widespread destruction and the deaths of millions of civilians through massacres, bombings, and starvation. The Nazi regime also relied on forced labor, concentration camps, and ethnic cleansing, leaving a trail of suffering across Europe. German records and the Nuremberg trials provide undeniable evidence of Hitler's atrocities. His actions not only devastated Europe, but left an enduring impact on global history, marking him as one of the most infamous figures of all time. Number 4. Khan, Mongol Empire, 1206 to 1227. Genghis Khan's Mongol Empire was built through ruthless conquest, leaving a trail of destruction across Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. Entire cities were razed, and populations were massacred to instill fear and ensure swift Mongol domination. Persian and Chinese records describe mass executions where millions were slaughtered. His military tactics included psychological warfare, deception, and brutal punishments for resistance. The Mongol invasions led to drastic population declines, particularly in Persia and Central Asia, with some regions losing up to 90% of their inhabitants. Historians agree that his campaigns resulted in one of the largest death tolls in history, making Genghis Khan's reign one of the bloodiest in recorded history. Number 5. Leopold II of Belgium, Congo Free State, 1885 to 1908. Leopold II of Belgium ruled the Congo Free State as his personal colony, enforcing a brutal system of forced labor to extract rubber and other resources. Indigenous Congolese were subjected to torture, mutilation, and mass executions if they failed to meet quotas. Soldiers frequently cut off hands and limbs as punishment. The brutal exploitation led to mass starvation, disease outbreaks, and population collapse. Despite efforts to cover up these atrocities, reports from missionaries and eyewitnesses expose the horrors. Belgian colonial records confirm the drastic decline in the Congolese population, and modern historians estimate up to 15 million deaths. His reign remains a dark chapter in colonial history, highlighting the horrors of imperial exploitation. Number 6. Timur, Tamerlane, Central Asia and Middle East, 1370 to 1405. Timur, also known as Tamerlane, waged brutal campaigns across Persia, India, and the Middle East, leaving behind a path of destruction. He was notorious for wiping out entire cities, often executing entire populations to instill fear. Chronicles describe his massacres in Baghdad, Delhi, and Aleppo, where hundreds of thousands were slaughtered. Timur's military campaigns also targeted specific ethnic and religious groups, leading to widespread ethnic cleansing. His conquests resulted in vast depopulation, with some historians estimating a death toll as high as 5% of the world's population at the time. His legacy remains controversial. While he was a brilliant strategist, his reign was one of the most violent in history. Number 7. Hirohito, Japan, 1926 to 1989. Hirohito was the Emperor of Japan during World War II, under whose rule Japan committed widespread atrocities. The Nanjing Massacre saw Japanese soldiers murder over 300,000 Chinese civilians, including women and children. Japan's Biological Warfare Unit, Unit 731, conducted horrific experiments, spreading disease among Chinese populations. Millions died from forced labor, famine, and massacres in occupied territories across Asia. Japan's expansionist policies led to war crimes in Korea, the Philippines, and Southeast Asia, with mass executions and brutal military operations. Documents from the Tokyo trials confirm these crimes, though Hirohito himself was never prosecuted. His rule remains one of history's most controversial, with many debates over his responsibility in Japan's war crimes. Number 8. Chiang Kai-shek, China-Taiwan, 1928 to 1975. Chiang Kai-shek led China's nationalist government during the Chinese Civil War and later ruled Taiwan. His leadership was marked by brutal crackdowns on communists and political dissidents. During the war, millions died due to forced conscription, starvation, and executions. The White Terror in Taiwan saw tens of thousands of political opponents imprisoned, tortured, or executed. Chiang's policies contributed to mass famine and suffering, particularly as he prioritized military campaigns over civilian needs. Historians estimate that between 5 to 10 million people perished due to his regime's repression and wartime devastation. While praised for modernizing Taiwan, his legacy remains overshadowed by the violence of his rule. Number 9. Pol Pot, Cambodia, 1975 to 1979. Pol Pot, leader of the Khmer Rouge, orchestrated one of the worst genocides in modern history. His regime sought to create an agrarian communist utopia by forcing city dwellers into the countryside for hard labor. Intellectuals, professionals, and perceived enemies of the state were executed, while millions perished from starvation and disease. The infamous killing fields became execution sites where people were brutally slaughtered. By the end of his rule, nearly 25% of Cambodia's population had died. UN investigations and Cambodian records confirm the massive loss of life, solidifying Pol Pot's place among history's bloodiest dictators. His reign remains a grim reminder of ideological extremism's deadly consequences. Number 10. Ranavalona Ors, Madagascar, 1828 to 1861. Ranavalona I ruled Madagascar with an iron fist, implementing harsh forced labor policies and brutal crackdowns on dissent. Her reign saw massive population declines due to executions, deadly military campaigns, and widespread famine. She isolated Madagascar from foreign influence, worsening economic conditions and leading to starvation. Ranavalona's security forces carried out purges against suspected enemies, while her forced labor projects resulted in high mortality rates. Historical accounts from European observers document the devastation her rule caused, with estimates suggesting that over 2.5 million people perished. Her legacy remains controversial. Some view her as a nationalist leader, while others see her as a ruthless despot responsible for mass suffering. That's all for this video. Subscribe to us, thanks.